Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hi, welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. Player profiles in the books. Mr. Jim Eichenhofer, Pelicans.com. Gus Kattengell with you. Now it's time to get you ready for the NBA draft. 7th, that is where the New Orleans Pelicans will pick. We've had the lottery. In the meantime, we're going to go through 1 through 6, aren't we, to kind of get Pels fans a little ready as to what maybe could happen around that pick at 7, but also what the teams in front of them are possibly thinking with people that cover not only the Pelicans, but those teams as well.
And in this case, we're talking to someone who has covered the Pelicans and the current team that he's reporting on, and that is Christian Clark, who writes for The Athletic, does an outstanding job covering the Dallas Mavericks, has had quite an eventful 24 and 25, you might say, based on what's happened with these two basketball franchises that he's covered. But yeah, we're going to go through the top 6 teams. We're going to have someone, a media member, who covers each of those teams that are picking before the Pelicans. So we can kind of get a little bit of a feel maybe of how things are going to play out before the Pelicans spot comes up on the draft board. And we're also going to discuss the top 12 prospects with 2 players per episode. We're going to have Andrew Lopez and various other people break down some of the top players that may or may not be available when the Pelicans pick. But we're going to start today with our good friend Christian Clark talking to us from Dallas.
Well, it's a good thing, Christian, that you haven't been busy at all, not only covering the team, but also in your personal life. Huh, buddy? How are you doing?
There's a lot going on at the Clark household right now. Got a 2-week-old, and yeah, I mean, like the team I cover now, it's been a wild couple months. You know, I started in early December, watched Luka play, I think 7 or 8 times, and then he gets hurt on Christmas, and then they trade him a couple weeks after that. You know, miserable end to the season with injuries, self-inflicted wounds, and somehow they luck into Cooper Flagg. 1.8% chance. I mean, I couldn't believe it. When I was sitting there, I saw, okay, they've gotten in the top 4. They had an 8.5% chance, like amazing, but no way they went all the way up to number 1, right? Like the odds are just too slim. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, that just seemed like it stunned everyone. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about your role too with covering the Mavericks and writing for The Athletic to report on them is also you're from the area as well. So I think we talked to you during the season, and I like your perspective because obviously being from that area, you know the fan base really well. Grew up around a lot of Mavericks fans and that kind of thing. So, I mean, you have really good insight too, beyond, just a basketball writer who's covering the team. What has been the reaction so far? I mean, I feel like it was very well documented, obviously, during the season that it was somewhat slightly negative towards the Luka trade. I mean, after this Cooper Flagg news or the news that the Mavericks won the lottery, I mean, what's it been like? Is all forgiven now? Is everybody ready to kind of turn the page and say we're good now? We don't need to protest outside the arena.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fan discontentment was probably the most interesting storyline after the Luka trade. I mean, it was like a situation where, ownership, I think, had to seriously look at, do we need to fire somebody just to like improve or like, fix this relationship with our fan base a little bit. And they obviously didn't. And I think this Cooper Flagg thing is going to help a lot. I think the mood is better. I think it's definitely going to help from like a season ticket renewal standpoint. I think just eyeballs on the team, when you're online, like that's I think an extreme portion of the fan base. I don't think it's representative of like the median fan or whatever, but a lot of those people who are like the most passionate people still want them to make a change at the front office. And I don't think that's going to happen, but it has helped, but there's still a lot of anger and not a lot of trust.
Yeah, the way you described it, it's almost like you have to have like a sacrificial offering to people to appease them, to get them to calm down from where they were. But, I understand that it definitely seems like that's not going to happen at this point. Obviously, the Mavericks in their public comments so far, I mean, we experienced this in 2019 with Zion. Everyone in the world knew that the Pelicans were going to pick Zion, but we weren't able to publicly say that the franchise wasn't able to say like, yeah, Zion's definitely going to be the pick. So I've noticed, for example, the president of the Mavericks has said, we like Cooper Flagg. He can't come out and flat out say that they're going to pick him. But I guess from your perspective and everything that you've heard from talking to different people, I mean, there's obviously no debate. I'm not going to ask you if they pick first, are they going to take Cooper Flagg, because you'd say that's the dumbest question ever. But I mean, there has been some different discussions about possible trades and that kind of thing. I mean, is that possible, or is that just that something that people have talked about just because we need things to discuss during the off season?
Yeah, I mean the night of the draft, when it was announced that the Mavericks were moving all the way up to number one, that was a lot of what I was asking. I was sending out, are you guys definitely going to make this pick text and things like that? And the vibes I was picking up that night was, yeah, we're going to stay there. We're going to make this pick. I mean, I think it was a legitimate question. Right after it happened, do you look to move this pick to try to get in on like a guy like Giannis? I mean, we just know that Nico Harrison is very focused on the short term, not the long term. And
Right.
Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis are guys approaching their mid-30s. So I don't think there's like a long contention window here. But look, they're going to keep this pick. They're going to make this pick. And I don't know like Nico Harrison's thinking on it, but I think that ownership is looking at this like, hey, we probably made a mistake with the Luka thing, and we can't move this one. I think there's recognition that, okay, this is kind of a second chance, and we can't waste this.
You mentioned some of the other pieces, obviously, that are huge in the foundation of the team. Anthony Davis, we're extremely familiar with here. Obviously, Kyrie Irving, there's questions about when he comes back next season. With the injury that he has, I'm sure he's not going to be ready at the beginning of the season, especially with the timing of when he was injured. But here we are in early June. We have no idea. There's a bunch of other moves and stuff that the Mavs could make that'll alter the roster. But in terms of what the Mavericks have right now and the pieces that I mentioned and some of their other players, how does Cooper Flagg fit if he's who they pick, in terms of what his skill set is, how you blend him in just as a rookie, like immediately in October?
Yeah, I think they love the fact that he is a two-way player and has a chance to be, just a special defensive player. Great steal rate, great block rate. He's really big. To me, I think he's more of a four than anything else. A power forward. I think the Mavericks could honestly start him at small forward. I mean, one of the ideas behind the Anthony Davis trade is we're going to have him play power forward, and we're going to put him next to Derek Lively second, or Daniel Gafford. I would imagine they want to continue doing that next year, which means that, hey, Cooper Flagg, you're in at the 3, not the 4, because AD is blocking you at the 4. So I think you're going to see the Mavs play really big. I think it could be a starting front line of Flagg, AD, Derek Lively. So I think that's what you're going to see them do. I mean, my big question with the Mavericks right now is, what are they going to do at lead guard? Because Kyrie Irving is going to be out until 2026. I mean, they've got one point guard who's going to be healthy at the start of next season under contract right now, and that's Brandon Williams, who was a two-way player for most of last year. So it's obvious that the Mavericks need to make a move at guard, or moves plural.
Obviously, from a Pelicans perspective, the most significant part of whatever the Mavs do is this is a team that you're playing 4 times every year, guaranteed. They're in your division. And so I'm curious about, you reference this a little bit, but is it the kind of thing where you look at it like, Nico Harrison made comments about, for example, our window is the next 2 or 3 years, but now you have a player that could be your franchise foundation for 10, 12 years. Is it the kind of thing where they can look at it like, I know that the Golden State had kind of an infamous 2 timelines thing that didn't really work out, but is it the kind of thing right now with the addition that they're able to make with the number 1 pick, where you can look at it like we can be really good, we can compete for a title, maybe put ourselves in that conversation, but we can also have this separate track where we start building around a young player over the next however many years?
I do think the Mavericks look at it like that right now. The two, we can meld these 2 timelines together type thing. I think, a lot of that is contingent on Kyrie Irving looking like Kyrie Irving once he's able to get back from the torn ACL in his left knee, and we'll see. I don't know. I know he's gonna, attack his rehab, but you can't you can't, compete for championships without a really good lead guard. And I
Mhm.
would say the difference between the two timelines things, like here in Dallas and like Golden State is, I mean, look, they tried to do it with like James Wiseman and Moses Moody and Jonathan
Right.
Kuminga. Like those guys have some talent. Like Cooper Flagg's just way better, I
Hmm.
think. I mean, I just think he's way better. And I mean, he is super, super young. He reclassified to go to college a year early. Like he turned 18 years old in December. He's not going to be 19 until this, 6 months from now, 7 months from now. But I do think he's good enough to like at least contribute to winning right away. I don't think he's a guy where you just give him the ball and like he dictates the offense. Like I don't think he's that kind of guy, but I do
Mhm.
think he's a guy who does a little bit of everything for you, um, and affects the game in a lot of different ways.
Christian, my last question for you, I think that's interesting to me is by the time, these picks are made with Dallas or New Orleans, Jim and Christian, is we're going to have our seventh different NBA champion over 7 seasons, which is kind of remarkable when you think about it, because you're talking about what Dallas may be doing to build. We're kind of looking at what the Pels are going to do under new leadership here as well. What do you make out of that? That we've had so many different champions. Look, we've had teams that are in and around the top of each conference that are good, right? We kind of know that Boston's been good for a bit. We see the rise of OKC. When you were talking about your size, I'm thinking how big and physical OKC is and how they've built it too. Is there a blueprint on how to build a champion? And can you say there is one if there's 7 different over 7 seasons?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think depth has never been more important. I mean, I look at Oklahoma City and Denver, that 7-game series, and I'm like, Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world. I think he's better than Shea, but it doesn't matter because the Thunder were the better team,
Hmm.
clearly. I mean, like the Nuggets were depending on like Russ, on Julian Strother, who had, one really good game, but they're just depending on these guys where it's like, I don't know. And the Thunder are, deepest team in the NBA. A lot of the reason they had the best point differential ever in the regular season, but depth really matters. And I think just being able to, play different styles too. Like Oklahoma City, they had a fantastic season last year. And then this offseason, they're like, we're going to go out and get Isaiah Hartenstein. We're going to be able to play two bigs, but we don't have to do that. I mean, we can just go Chet and play 5 out if we want to, but we can also have like this great two big lineup. So I'd say like depth and versatility are two things that, I relook at this and I value.
And it's crazy when you think of the Eastern Conference Finals. You have two completely different styles of basketball, right? I mean, Indiana is a team that's fast and physical above the rim. And Jim, I think New York plays 6 players, right? I mean, I'm joking, but
Pretty much, yeah.
they're a team that
Yeah.
plays their starters really. So two contrasting styles, but played for the Eastern Conference Championship. So yeah, I think it's per season. I think injury is the one common denominator factor here. It could derail your best plans, can't it? Would you
Yeah,
say that?
I mean, what Christian said about depth also
Yeah.
plays into that a lot too. I mean, you can't, you do need to have depth so that you can sustain. I mean, we talked unfortunately a lot about player availability this past season. So, I mean, yeah, you go through the season if you only have 6 or 7 guys and a couple of them go out. I mean, people, I know people talked about at the end of the Denver series that they were almost down to about 3 guys if you throw in the guys that were hurt and the other players that they couldn't rely on. So yeah, I think that might be the thing that determines champions over the next few years. And I think
It's a good point.
part of why there has been a little bit more fluctuation from year to year because the injuries have definitely been a factor, unfortunately.
Yeah, you never know what happens when you draft a player, huh, Christian? Final thoughts from you?
I don't know what's going to happen anytime. I mean, this is all of this has been unpredictable. I certainly could have predicted they're going to trade Luka and then they're going to luck into a guy who has a chance to be a face of the franchise for the next 10 years. Um, it's fun. It's fun. I hope Cooper Flag hits, and I'm optimistic that he seems like he's about the right things.
Yeah, Christian, it's funny when you left here, you thought, things will be much more stable in Dallas. There won't be as many injury issues. There won't be as much controversy. Everything will be more set in place.
Yes.
And then look what you ended up getting. So what a 6 months for you. You left in November. I remember the game you left. It was the game against Toronto right before Thanksgiving. And we thought, he's going to comfortable Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
He's gonna be
Lucky
able to
him.
just relax. He's gonna be able to kick back and just calmly monitor the situation. But
Yeah.
didn't quite happen that way. So,
And then the fans were about to like storm the building with like
Yeah,
pitchforks and
I just
tiki
want to
torches.
were you blamed for any of this though, right? Because you were always blamed for stuff here. So were you blamed for the Luka trade up there?
No, I don't. I'm pretty insignificant here. Yeah, I mean, I'm like the 7th most important reporter. So no one was blaming me. I don't think anybody was thinking about me here. So.
Well, in our hearts and minds, you're number one, sir, which is why you let things off. It could happen to be because your team's actually leading things off, but we do love you at @CClark_13, Mr. Christian Clark. Try to get some shut eye. It eventually will come. I promise, man. Congrats to you. I'm glad everybody's healthy, and we'll see you real soon, man, as the season's right around the corner.
I'm booking that first road game in New Orleans for sure. I'll be on that one.
maybe we'll see you in Summer League before then, too.
Oh.
You never know.
Never know.
Look out, Jimmy Vegas.
Mr. Christian Clark of The Athletic. Thank you, sir. Our thanks to Mr. Christian Clark of The Athletic giving us his thoughts as to what took place. Mr. Jim Eichenhofer with the Dallas Mavericks. And here to kind of talk about maybe the potential of all of those different players that the Dallas Mavericks can take is none other than our sideline reporter, and you see him on the Gulf Coast and Sports Entertainment Network as well, Mr. Andrew Lopez for us. What's up, sir? How are you?
You know what? I'm happy that Christian found enough time in his schedule to be awake enough for the pod. I know it's been a very busy time over there with the Dallas Mavericks and their 1.8% chance. Not that, anybody's going to remember how much percent chance they had at getting this number one pick, but hey, we're here and get to talk about some good basketball players.
Yeah, Andrew, during this series, we're going to be talking about a handful of prospects with you. Some of the guys that are kind of right now projected to go in the top part of the draft or throughout the lottery. And we're going to start today with Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper. Those are two of the guys right now that have been pretty much a consensus at the top of the board. I guess we can start with Cooper Flagg. Obviously, this is a player that appears that the Pelicans and the fan base will be watching him as an opponent for a long time, based on all likelihood. First of all, too, I wanted to ask you from some of the new guests. Every time we have a different guest come in, and I want to ask you kind of a starting point of how do you prepare for the draft? Obviously, you were an ESPN reporter. You work for NOLA.com, among other things. What is kind of your process of how you start kind of researching these guys?
Back when I was with ESPN, it was always kind of it went with how the team I was covering was going.
Sure.
I mean, in those years when I was here with the Pels and it was a playoff year, okay, I'm not paying as much attention to it. Last season when I was, I guess it's still technically last season. I guess we are still in this season since it's the playoffs. That 23-24 season, I'm paying a lot more attention to it because I know the Spurs, the record was bad. I was doing that. Once the injuries kind of happened, and probably about January or February of this year, I started, putting on an extra couple college games, really starting reading some scouting reports, following the guys that I follow. So probably February on, I remember sitting on the plane with AD talking about this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. And I watched this game the other night. So it's a slow process, but obviously once the season stopped, once things kind of slowed down, then it's, even this was even pre-lottery, you really kind of start diving into,
Sure.
You're looking at clips of these guys, you're watching, you're reading all, anything you could find, trying to figure out just who these guys are.
I give you credit because my process, as I've joked about with you before, is I'm like the student that doesn't show up for class the whole semester. And then it's a few days before the test, I show up and I start cramming. Yeah. So I really waited till I usually do this when the years that the Pelicans aren't going to be in the playoffs. I wait until the lottery results so I know when they're picking. I know the range of players that I need to really laser focus more in on. So are you a big video guy? I actually am always, I've been impressed the last few years how much is available even on YouTube where they have these scouting breakdowns of 10, 15 minutes. And it's like, to me, to be able to learn so much in 10 minutes on a guy, that's actually a huge part of what I do to get ready too. It's
kind of funny because I think it started like back in the day, like watching the Draft Express videos with Gavoni and the stuff that they would put out. And now there's so many people who do so many things. If you want an analytical breakdown of these guys, there's a guy or 20 for that.
Right.
if you want a video breakdown, there's this. If you want pros, there's cons. There's this video. There's that video. I just think there's so much information to have that it's kind of funny because I think it makes for a smarter draft community, but also, I mean, for the guys who have to actually make these decisions, there's just so much more information out there right now that it just makes their job even more difficult.
Just something real quick, because I always find it interesting, too. It's a little different, right? NFL draft and NBA draft is this. And NFL, I've seen a player 3 years in college, right? Even if he's transferred, like Jayden Daniels here at LSU. We saw him at Arizona State. He played 2 years at LSU. With the NBA, man, like he said the word cram. I'm trying to find out about a lot of these guys. Let's be honest, right? Until you start getting to conference play, conference tournament, if they go into the NCAA, that's the closest high-level competition, stakes-type basketball. I mean, I'm not ripping them, but let's be honest, the games in early November, December in college pre-conference, they're directional schools, right? That some of the big school names are playing, so they're not really playing some of the top teams. How hard is that to scout and make decisions on these guys that might have faced one or two possible future NBA players?
You're looking at some of these guys who in the past, I mean, obviously the guys who are in higher conferences, you can judge a little bit better. But for some of these guys who are 18 years old, 19 years old, part of your scouting process in the NBA is you got to go back and watch a little high school film. You got to go back and watch what they did on the AAU circuit.
Yep.
There's Peach Jam is important. What they did on EYBL circuit or whatever circuit they're on, Adidas circuit, Nations. If they played any level of USA basketball or whatever, world basketball, whatever they're at. So
like-minded competition.
Right. So it's difficult. There's not, 36 games that you can go through and, I know 24 of these are SEC games. And I know what I'm going to get from a football player or anything like that. Or for Jayden, give back to Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels has 5 years of film. I mean, these guys have 1 year of college film. And as we'll get to in the case with Harper, is particularly him and Ace Bailey, the talent level around them wasn't that high. And they're doing a lot of things. I think a number of the guys that we're going to talk about in this series, just to kind of set this up, is guys making plays without NBA level guys around them. And that's another part of this process for decision makers is, all right, well, how does this guy fit? Because that guy that he's passing to may not play another minute of basketball when his college career is done. Or that guy may go play overseas, maybe. And now I'm putting him in around NBA level guys. How does that change what he does? Or did he do too much? Again, I know a guy like Jeremiah Fears, who shot 28% from three, but was taking a lot of difficult threes because of the attention the defense was on. So there's just so many small things that evaluators have to try to figure out. And frankly, I'm glad I'm not being paid to have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what you're talking about is context as far as, how do you translate the role that this guy in college had and what he's going to be in the NBA? Because there's almost no cases where it's the same thing that you can just say like, okay, this is what this guy did in college and he's going to just be able to transfer that right over to the NBA. In the case of Cooper Flagg, I mean, this is a guy who's played with multiple players as Duke teammates who are projected to be in the NBA. A couple other players are going to be lottery picks based on what we're seeing at this stage as well. So, I mean, from what you saw of him in his one season, not a huge sample, but there's also other things that people look at from his career, including the participation he had with the USA camp in Vegas that people are still talking about, how well he performed there. What do you think are some of the things that he does well? And I mean, it feels like, too, just his versatility, the fact that there's a bunch of different boxes that he checks is why people are so excited about his potential in the NBA.
I think the big thing about him, first, let's talk about him like this. He's supposed to be a high school senior right now.
He reclassified, yep.
He reclassified up and still got all the accolades at Duke and is the consensus number one pick. His twin brother is just finished winning, is like headed to Maine next year. He's going to go play his college ball at Maine. But like obviously did not reclassify. I played with him a year at Montverde and then, went back home, I think, to play. So that's one thing that stands out automatically is he's on a younger year. You look at some of those advanced numbers from what he had this year, just in what he was able to do on the court all around. It compares to guys like AD and Zion and what they were able to do in terms of these are high-level first guys, and he is still a year younger than a lot of them. I think the biggest thing for him, though, is he projects as a true two-way guy, which I don't know if you've heard, but according to GMs in Dallas, defense wins championships. So
many times we've heard that, yes.
It fits with what they want to do. It fits what I think what a lot of teams want to do, and I think there's a reason why he was coveted by so many teams. Is he's not just going to be a guy who, he's not an offensive savant. He's not this guy who's going to come in and average 28 right away in a league or anything like that. But he can get to that level. But I think it's his true kind of two-way potential and what he can able to do on both sides of the floor that kind of make him so valuable.
One of the things that we talked about with Christian Clark was just, the fact that he can do so many different things. I mean, how curious are you, interested to see just what his fit is going to be with Dallas and just the way that they're going to be able to use him? Yeah,
one of my things is he almost kind of better projects, I think, as a 4. He could probably play the 3. He could probably play the 2 if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. How does that deal with, when they're going to have AD and Lively on the floor or Gafford or PJ and it kind of jumbles up their front court. But again, I guess that's a good problem to have is 4 to 5 guys who you absolutely trust who could play the 4 and 5 position. Him sliding to the 3, I think, won't be that much of a big deal. But, we're in such positionless basketball anyway now. I think where he fits, he's a smart enough player that he's going to be able to fit in. I think that he was adaptable at Duke. Mm-hmm. And I'm he'll probably be adaptable in Dallas as well. Mm-hmm. And I trust Jason Kidd to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're going to be able to put some big lineups on the court too. So how that affects teams like the Pelicans will be interesting to see as well in some of those head-to-head competitions. I wanted to set this up as the first episode we're doing in this series of 6 different episodes where we're talking about specific teams as well as prospects. What we're going to do with all the guests is we're going to talk about some of the pro comparisons that each player coming into the draft has. And I wanted to kind of read off some of the more common ones that I've seen for Cooper Flagg on various websites. And you can kind of go talk about which ones you like the best. We're seeing Jason Tatum. We're seeing Scottie Pippen, the guy who played for the Bulls, not the one who plays for the Grizzlies right now. We're seeing Franz Wagner, Kawhi Leonard, Jalen Johnson, Scotty Barnes. And part of why I like the pro comparisons is, I'll speak for myself here. I watched Cooper Flagg play once or twice, maybe at the most this season. Some of the guys we're talking about, I did not watch at all. So I need a picture in my mind of what type of player we're talking about. And that helps me when I start watching the video to say, okay, maybe I like this comparison. I don't like this one. But what do you think when you hear some of those comparisons?
Yeah, I think the one that I've liked the most has probably been the Kawhi one. And I'm again, I think, and we've talked about this. This is not saying that this guy is going to come into the NBA and be Kawhi Leonard right away. Mm-hmm. But that's probably his absolute ceiling is probably, I don't want to say his absolute ceiling. With any of these guys coming in, they could make their own new ceiling.
Sure.
But you can see him being potentially a guy like Kawhi, where he's your number one option on both offense and defense. The Tatum one, I think you look at kind of how Tatum's game and how he's able to get to the rim. Almost he's kind of Tatum without a shot right now. Mm-hmm. For our older listeners, the Scottie Pippen one and what he was able to do. You should actually go back and look at Scottie the 2 years without Michael. Mm-hmm. I think all of those are good. And I think it kind of shows you how all over the place he is with some of these comps. You're like, oh, man, how does Scottie Barnes and Jalen, like how there's all these different things of his game that you see. And I think Scottie is probably one of the other ones, but I think the Kawhi is probably the top one. I think that is like, oh, if he can get to be that guy, then yeah, you're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, and again, when we're talking about comparisons too, we're talking more about traits in terms of what are this player's tendencies. what's his style of play. I remember back in the day when we had across the NBA, there was a lot more access to the draft workouts, and back in even the Hornets days, we would have second round picks here. And every player, regardless of where they were projected for the draft, we'd ask them to make a pro comparison or name a couple guys that they play like. And I always remember people's fan reactions, readers' reactions to a guy who's going to go in the second round who said, mentioned like an all-star. They would be like, how arrogant is this guy that he, and it's like, no, let's calm down. We're not saying that the guy is going to be that good. It's just to give you a picture of
an idea
what the player is going to be like, and you put yourself in their shoes too. They're trying to sell themselves a little bit too. They're not going to say, right. A 13th man. I'm like that. They're going to say somebody who's playing a lot.
Which I think is just going back to last year's draft process is when Bronny James was asked about guys he looked like or he thought his game meant. One of the guys he mentioned was Davion Mitchell, who at that point was not thought like. There's probably a lot of casual NBA fans who at that point did not know who Davion Mitchell was.
Right. He's a rotation guy.
And now,
rotation
and
guy.
so the fact that was kind of one of the things he answered was kind of I like that about him. But for these comps, it's more of traits. I don't think anybody is like, hey, it's always the who do you model your game after? And some of these guys are just sometimes a little bit more realistic than others in what they watch.
Last part on Cooper Flagg. Is there, and again, we're going to be asking pretty much everyone this question. Is there anyone that you can compare from the Pelicans history? And we're going all the way back to 2002 when the franchise came here. Is there anybody that is reminiscent of Cooper Flagg?
This one's probably We'll get into the other guys that I have been assigned in this little series a little later. I really don't know. It's almost like you're taking at peak if we're using Kawhi as a comp. At peak, you're looking at like Herb Jones defense and Brandon Ingram offense.
He's that good defensively, huh?
I mean, I don't think he's going to be that. I don't think he's going to be a guy who's first team all defense next year.
But he can play D.
But I think he can, and I think that's one of the things that he can do. He's not a liability. You can name any other wing, bigger wing defenders but like if that's his ceiling, that's what he would be. And so it to me, it's just it would take a lot, and this is probably 3, 4, 5 years down the road if he's meeting all of his potential. But that could be what it is. But this one of the series. In fact, the two you gave me today are probably the two toughest to answer. I got the other ones down. I'm good with my other ones. But these two guys, very, very difficult.
So for Dylan Harper, I guess we'll talk about him. Starting with, what you saw from him this season. I know people talked a lot about Rutgers' lack of success. They didn't make the tournament, which was disappointing. But again, as a draft novice, I will say, watching the video of him, I'm really impressed with just his shiftiness off the dribble, just the way that he can get into the paint. What are some of the things that you saw from him that stand out the most from his one season in college?
His ability to score the basketball, for one. We could talk a little bit about now. They didn't exactly have all the players. You look at a team like Rutgers, and you're thinking, Rutgers could have 2 of the top 3 picks in the NBA draft and did not make the NCAA tournament. How is that possible? And I think that's more of a product of what was around them rather than their skill themselves. But one thing that he does, I think he gets to the rim. You'd probably like to see him draw a little bit more free throws, but I know drawing free throws is a big topic in the NBA right now because of what we've seen in these playoffs.
The foul merchant. That's apparently his new nickname for SGA.
If you can get there, he is a scorer. I think the playmaking is there. He's a bigger guard. We'll get into the comps in a second, but I just think he is an all around player. He's got the NBA pedigree. In fact, one of the comps that I've seen for him is his dad, is Ron Harper.
Second 90s Bulls reference of the day.
Didn't think we'd get that many. Is Ron Harper. So to me, I just think he's an all-around good player. Would have, think he fits again with a lot of different teams, and kind of projected to go number 2 right now to the Spurs, but how does he fit with that guard heavy lineup? But again, a good problem to have.
Sure. We talked about Cooper Flagg's comparisons. The comparisons that I've seen the most prominently about Dylan Harper, and man, this is a pretty impressive list, is Cade Cunningham, Jalen Williams, Jalen Brunson, Kobe White, James Harden, and De'Aaron Fox. So what do you think when you hear that list of players that are compared to him?
I think the other one that I've heard is almost, and this was a jumbo Ja Morant.
Okay.
I don't think that's a lot to put on a guy, especially with the explosiveness. I don't think he's there yet, but just in terms of the way he's cutting, he's getting to the rim. The Jalen Williams ones is kind of there with a little bit more ball handling, a little bit more playmaking. Mm-hmm. But look, he is a very good basketball player, and I think this is one of those years where we've seen it before, where you got number 1, and man, it really kind of it sucked to get number 2. You didn't want to get number 2 or whatever it was going to be. This is not one of those years. Yes, obviously, I think anybody would have taken Cooper Flagg, and you give 30 teams the decision, they're probably going to take Cooper Flagg over Dylan Harper.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But I think there's probably 30 out of 30, 29 out of 30, let's say. There's probably maybe one that's probably taking Dylan Harper number 2.
Sure. Lastly, and we referenced this earlier, this would be the difficult one. Any Pelicans comparisons from the history of this franchise you
that
can come
one's
up with?
Probably like, again, just as a 6'6" kind of guard. Like maybe it's like what DeJounte is supposed to be, except a little bit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, and I say DeJounte is supposed to be like not hurt DeJounte.
Right.
Like what we saw from DeJounte this season. That one's just a difficult one. There's some other ones that I know. It's like a slightly bigger Drew, but not that on defense.
Thickness and size and toughness.
Like offensive
but
Drew
wasn't an offensive guy really.
Not like size wise, but no. But like that one's, again, it's a difficult one. But when you're throwing out, the Cades and the, guys like that, it's kind of hard.
I just keep looking at the thing that stands out to me with him. And look, he's a guy that I've watched a lot during just in college because he looks like a football player out there, man. I mean, he just looks thick. And when we're watching the playoffs and you're seeing what's happening in the West overall, there's a lot of contact. And, just again, in the history of the Pelicans and the Thunder and the history of the Pelicans with some of these teams they're going to face, look at the way the Knicks play defense. Caruso, what he was doing earlier to start that series against Minnesota. Andrew, to have a guard that can absorb that contact and it's not throwing him off a rhythm, off of balance, or maybe wants that contact. I think that's the thing that's going to scare me if he does wind up being in the Western Conference.
And I think the other thing about Harper is when he measured at the combine, I think it was the everything kind of stood out. Everything was kind of where he was supposed to be. Like we've seen a couple of guys lose. They were listed at Ace Bailey was listed at 6'10", came in about 7.5 in shoes. I mean in
you went from 6'10" to 6'7"?
6'10" to 6'10", 6'10" listed. Okay. 6'7.5" and barefoot, which is how they list you at the combine. Which I don't know why.
That's a pretty big difference.
I don't know why, because you don't play basketball barefoot.
Yeah.
So
but
he's going to be a guy who's a shade under 6'9" on the basketball floor.
Yeah.
You saw some of his measurements and you're like, oh, he's 6'4.5" barefoot. That's about on line with his 6'6" that he's listed at. Mm-hmm. He was 213 pounds. I mentioned the basketball pedigree from his dad, Ron Harper. His mom, also a collegiate basketball player at UNO. So the local tie there for the kid. But he's got, like you said, the size to get to the rim, which is, as teams are playing bigger. We've talked about the lineup that the Dallas Mavericks can kind of put out there right now. We've seen the lineups that the Oklahoma City Thunder can put out there. Having a big 6'6", 215 lead guard is, pretty good.
Well, I tell you, we'll see what takes place with those top 2 players going, where they're going to go. We seem to think, though, and I know Jim's been doing a lot of research, looking at a bunch of mock drafts. Would you be surprised if it doesn't go like that, 1 and 2?
I think at this stage, I think I would be surprised if those guys aren't the top 2. I mean, mostly because I don't know if I can find one at this stage where they're not listed as the top 2. So unless everyone's wrong,
if you find one where they're not 1-2, it's somebody just trying to
Get some attention.
See, I told you so.
Yeah.
No, man, it's 1-2.
And obviously, going back to your days with ESPN, I'm sure you guys had probably discussions going into draft night. Hey, could there be plays for teams trying to move up and trade? These are two players that you want to draft, you want to keep, or they covet. I mean, like, do you envision a single scenario where Cooper Flagg doesn't go to Dallas?
No.
Like, what would be the package? What do you
say
trade
no.
for?
I say
but then we
no.
didn't think of Luka
but there was
and AD,
never
right?
a scenario where I thought Luka would get traded. So I won't say there's no scenario. However, even if, a certain superstar who, is from the Eastern Conference decides that he does want to ask for a trade, that would be the only person I think that could move the needle enough to where Dallas doesn't pick Cooper, San Antonio doesn't pick Jalen Harper.
I would say this. I think as you see, as we wrap up this episode, with the teams that made it to the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, and the fact that so much talk has been made, I think I even saw Mike Greenberg making his commentary on Get Up a little bit ago as the conference finals were starting. He said the era of the super teams are over, and he was glad for it. And he brought up the second apron. He brought up some of the things that the NBA has done to do that. The fact, Andrew, that at the end of this season, when it does conclude, we're going to have a 7th different champion in 7 straight years. So when you look at that, I mean, whether you're mentioning certain players in certain conferences or certain teams that could be going, I don't know if you pull the trigger anymore. Maybe you do go with your young players. I mean, money is money. Age is age. You look at injuries. That's something I talked to Jim about, just at lunch. I'm like, man, what's the common denominator factor that blows up plans? I mean, here in New Orleans, we were ready to see the C.J. McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson era. How many games did they play together?
0. Yeah. Well, no, I'm sorry. That was the DeJounte
like 30 or something like that total, right?
Yeah, right.
But that's the point. It's like, so you can plan these super teams. You can move big name guys, put them together. But look at the Suns. Look at some of these other teams that just didn't work. So I'd be shocked. I think if you see those big moves like that,
it's you'd think, and then there's a Rudy Gobert trade. And then there's a Mikal Bridges trade.
Yeah.
And then you look at how the Knicks have built their roster, and it's, they brought in Jalen. Jalen Brunson wasn't homegrown. Josh Hart wasn't homegrown. Mikal Bridges wasn't homegrown. OG wasn't homegrown. Karl Anthony Towns wasn't homegrown. They went and made moves for those guys, or made space, or did something. So, maybe it's not the swings for the biggest names anymore, which I still think we're going to see bigger names. Obviously, we saw a trade with Luka Doncic this year. Yeah. Teams are still going to make swings, but I think teams are going to be smarter with how they move assets around those big guys anymore.
I still can't. I still look back at that day and go, it's got to be a hack.
It's fake.
It's got to be a hack.
It's fake. I was sitting on the couch. I was like, no, this is fake.
That's the new term, right? Like, will they be that's got to be a hack trade.
My favorite part of that whole night was the second tweet from Shams, which said, no, this is real. Then listed the details, which only made me think, oh, this is definitely a hack, because he would never have to say that this is real.
And that's something else. Andrew Lopez, as always, we can't wait to see what goes on here when we get closer to the draft at the end of June. All right, thanks for y'all for listening on a special edition as we get you ready for the NBA draft coming up towards the end of June here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.